Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coding Pink. I am Lucy, and this is another episode of Before the Code. So in today's video, we will be discussing flowcharts. Flowcharts are really important when it comes to planning your program before you actually start coding, because it allows us to see all the possible outcomes depending on what decision the user makes. So the more complex your programs start to get, the harder it's going to be to start thinking of programs off the dome. Okay, so you might start off with a simple hello world or hello girl program, and that might be easy to just write, without actually planning out. But the more complex your programs get, you're going to want a way to basically track each step so that you know you're not skipping anything. As well as flowcharts also provide a way for you to be able to explain your code and show your code to other users or other programmers or team members in a way that's really easy for them to understand. Now, I know firsthand programming can be super complicated, but if you really think about it, it really comes down to doing three things: sequences, branches, and loops. So by sequence, I literally just mean that the program is going to run from the top of the program to the bottom of the program. Whatever you write first happens first. Whatever the last line of your program is going to happen last. It's going to go from top to bottom. No other way. When I refer to branches, I'm just referring to the different type of conditions that can happen depending on the decision of the user. So a lot of times when we think about branches, we think about our if-else statement. If I click this button, this will happen. Else, meaning if I decide to click something else, then this will happen. So basically, branches are just the different outcomes you can get depending on the decision of the user. Loops are just a reiteration of a body of code until a certain condition is met. An example that we used in the previous video for loops is logging into a website. If you continue to put in the wrong password, then it's going to continue to prompt you to put it in again and again until ultimately you get to a certain amount of times where you max out and it goes on to the next step of verifying security, or until you put it in before that certain amount is met and you're led into the website. So just off rip, knowing those three things is a great basis for knowing how to do a flowchart. So when we talk about flow of control, we're talking about how a program flows from one instruction to the next. A flowchart is basically giving a visualization of the flow of control. Another way you might hear a flowchart being referred to is a diagram of algorithms. Now, if anybody else is like me, you hate algorithms because they mess up your Instagram story views, likes, and all of that other stuff. However, when we're talking about programming, we're just talking about a set of instructions followed by a computer in order to give a desired output. So the different shapes that are used in a flowchart are an oval, a rectangle, a parallelogram, a diamond, and an arrow. An oval represents the start and end of an algorithm. A rectangle represents an instruction that has to be fulfilled by the machine. A parallelogram represents input and output. So input that we receive from the user or output that's displayed to the user. A diamond represents a condition, so mainly true or false. And then we have our arrows, which represent the flow or the direction in which the program is being carried out. So flowcharts can be done literally so many different types of ways. So many different type of resources could be used to make flowcharts. I've done them by hand. I've used Microsoft Office, but more commonly than not, you want to use like an online software. It might be a little bit easier. And so for today's example, we're actually going to use an online software that I learned about while taking a course called Draw.io. So if you have the opportunity, you can either watch, then do, or follow along as you watch. I'm going to give you an example and we're going to look at it in pseudocode. And from there, we're going to create our very own flowchart to basically go along with the pseudocode. Now let's get into this video. So I'm going to go ahead and just start off in my Google browser. I am using Google Chrome, but it really doesn't matter. And I'm also on a Mac, if that means anything. So I'm going to go ahead and type in draw.io. Right here, we're basically deciding where we want to save our diagram. So if you click decide later, it'll basically just take you to a blank diagram sheet. But I'm actually going to go back and go ahead and save it to my device. But as you can see, there are other options that you can use: Dropbox, JIT, OneDrive, Google Drive. but I'm going to go ahead and save it to my device. So notice when I do click to save it in my device, it allows me to choose from an existing program or a new one. And these are all of the different types of flowchart templates they have. So I'm going to go ahead and say flowchart, or all the different diagrams are. Then you can decide which file you would like. I'm just going to keep the same XML file. And I'm going to go ahead and change my name to CMP example diagram, just for the sake of this example. And I just sped through me trying to find a folder to save it in because it was confusion. And here we are. This is where it lands us. So they've already given us like a simple template that we can look at if we want an example of how a flowchart works. And I'm just going to walk through this example with you, and then we're going to go through our own example. So in this example, they have it where the lamp doesn't work. So if we go down, it says, is the lamp plugged in? If we say no, it says plug in the lamp. Then if we say yes, then it asks us, is the bulb burned out? Well, if we say yes, the bulb is burned out, then it basically just tells us just to replace the bulb. If no, then the lamp should be repaired, or to go find an alternative to repair the lamp. So this is a just very, very basic example that they provided. But I'm going to go ahead and get started on our own example. So in that, I'm going to select one of the text boxes. I just clicked the one with the heading so that I can add a header to it to make it just easy for you to understand. And I'm going to go through the process of my favorite example, logging in, because I just feel like it's such a simple process that we're all familiar with and we can just go through. So I'm going to go ahead and delete what we have, put it in bullet form. So this is going to just be like a simple mini pseudocode situation going on. I'm going to list out some bullet points of logging into a software, Instagram, the computer, whatever. So we're going to make it really simple. So as you can see, we already have where we're going to start our diagram. We're going to display the welcome/login screen. We're going to ask, is the user registered? And I'm going to put some bullets under that. And if no, the user is not registered, then we want to go ahead and register the user. If yes, the user is registered, we're going to go ahead and continue with our process, logging them in. And so now that we're logging them in, we have to ask, okay, where is the login valid? Is the username valid? Is the password valid? If no, the username is not valid, we want to be able to allow them to go back and reprompt the login. Okay, so is reprompt not over? But if it is, then we're going to go ahead and allow them to continue going into the website. So as you can see, you're going to have to go ahead and extend that box. And I definitely spelled end wrong. But we're going to stop the diagram after that. That will basically be the end of our process. So y'all know me, and this bland situation we got going on is not going to work for me. This is coding pink for a reason. I'm super feminine, and yeah. So I'm actually going to go ahead and change the way my text box looks. You have the option to change the way your text box looks in any format or way possible, any color that you prefer. But y'all already know what I'm on. I'm gonna go to pink, and that's not the pink that I wanted. I want this pink. Okay. And as you can see, there's so many options you can choose from, any color pretty much. And I'm gonna go ahead and change my font color to white, just because I think white on pink looks good. Yeah, so that's good for me. So now I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of the previous diagram. And I'm going to go ahead and start with my oval, because we already discussed that in order to start your flowchart, the starting end starts and ends with ovals. And I'm going to go ahead and use what we use to flow through the diagram, which is our arrows. So draw.io actually gives you an option. If you see those circles on the ends of the arrow, they're also on the circle. You can use those as a point of connecting each shape to one another. As you can see, I just turned it off, which means you don't use it, but I'm actually going to turn it back on. I just wanted to show you the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and move that dot to the dot on the circle that I want to be connected to. And I'm going to swing it down. Now it can get a little funny, but it ultimately helps a lot. So as we previously discussed, if we want to record us getting anything, like any type of input from the user, or us displaying anything to the user, we're going to use a parallelogram. So right now I'm going to use this to display the welcome screen, or to represent displaying the welcome screen. And this diagram is not going to be too input output heavy. Like, I'm pretty much going to just insinuate, like, I don't need you, or I'm not going to put rather take in user email, take in user password. I'm just not going to get that into the detail with this video. This is just surface level. So the next thing is we have a decision to make, a yes or a no. So we know we're going to use a diamond, and we're basically just asking, is the user registered? Like, do they have a username and password, yes or no? And that yes or no is going to determine what screen is prompted next. So as you can see, I'm struggling with the arrow a little bit because I am a slight perfectionist. It is the Virgo in me.
I get so sick of black people with this zodiac shit.
And I don't want to let Miss Virgo down, so I'm going to try to get this together. I honestly feel like that's about as good as it's going to get, even though it's bothering me that it looks crooked. But I'm going to go ahead and add my decision question in there, which is the user registered? And so, of course, I have to break off into two separate arrows, one for yes and one for no. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the arrow to the diamond by the circles, and I'm going to go ahead and create the no arrow. So in order to do that, I just double tapped, and then it allows a text box to come up. Of course, you want to go ahead and make that text black if you did have white text, because you want it to be seen. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm also going to drag that note up above the line just because it makes me feel better that it's like that. So right here, I'm going to insert a rectangle, which, as you know, is like an instruction. It's saying what we're going to do. And right here, we're just basically saying if the user is not registered, we're going to register the user. So that's what's going to happen if the answer to our question is user registered or no. You can't tell right here, but I use the shift and arrow keys on my computer to select the word register, and that's what I'm doing, and changing the color back to white. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for yes. I'm going to attach the circle of the arrow to the circle of the diamond. I'm going to double tap it, and I'm going to write yes. And I'm going to change the color to black. So now I'm going to go ahead and get the arrow for post registration, and I'm going to go ahead and set it up to point downwards. It's going to eventually point to the login, which I'm about to create right now, the rectangle for login. And so basically, up until this point, we know that if the user is registered, the yes is going to lead down to the login box. And if the user is not registered, it's going to lead to the register box. And then after we register, we want it to point to login. So I'm going to go ahead and just connect each arrow to the circles of the box, or to the rectangle that they are supposed to be connected to. And so in this, I'm going to go ahead and actually, as you can see, you can just edit how the line looks by just pulling and tugging on the different circles along the line. So now I'm going to go ahead and get what I get when I'm trying to make a decision, which is a diamond. And I'm going to ask, is the login valid? Meaning, is the username right? Is the password right? And then, of course, from there, we're going to have to break off into two different decisions. So we're basically going to repeat the process that we used for is user register.
Only one step.
So what I have up until this point is saying that if the login is valid, we're going to go on to the next step. If the login is not valid, then we're going to circle it back around and tell the user to log in again. It actually probably would have been smart to set up a parallelogram where we had the user's input or even displaying to the user the login screen or taking in the user's information. But honestly, when I was doing it, I just wasn't thinking about that. Like I said, this is very, very top layer. But if you would have went the route of actually putting a parallelogram so that the user's input is being taken in and then asking is the login valid, that actually would have been a pretty good idea. So yeah, moving on, this will actually be our endpoint. I'm going to go ahead and get an oval and put it at the end, and I'm going to type in stop. So let's go ahead and go through what we have using the pseudocode and just matching it to what's going on the diagram. So we started, then we moved to display the welcome login screen. Then we asked, is the user registered? If we said no, we're going to go ahead and allow them to register, then log in. But if it was a yes, then, it automatically went to the login and allowed them to log in. So now we're asking, is the login valid? If yes, we're just going to go straight through and stop. If no, we're going to circle back, log in again, and then eventually log in until it's yes, and then we can stop our program. So now let's step it up a bit. So instead of just doing the regular program, we're going to be a little realistic. And let's say we want to allow them 5 attempts to log into the program. And if it can't log in within 5 attempts, then we're just going to tell them, okay, no, we can't. We can't log you in. It's a security issue at this point. So how would we go about this using our flowchart? Let's see. So we're just going to go ahead and add check attempts before the login, because we know that if we want to have 5 attempts, if it's over 5, we can't allow them to proceed onto the login screen. So we want to be able to check the number of attempts before we actually get to the login page. So we're going to go ahead and put the options that we're going to have. Has it been 5 attempts? If yes, then we're going to stop the program. If no, we're going to continue on with what we're doing. So let's go ahead and extend our box down. And I'm just going to go ahead and start readjusting my diagram, because I know I'm going to have to start inserting new shapes inside. So I'm going to go ahead and insert an attempt variable, and I'm going to equal it to 0. And I lowercased it just because every time I think about a variable, I just think about a lowercase variable. So I just wanted to go ahead and make it lowercase. And I'm going to go ahead and connect that arrow to the rectangle. Now I'm going to create something asking, is the attempt greater than 5? And I'm going to go ahead and insert it in between.
Only one step.
So it actually hit me right here that I asked the question that needed a decision, but I used a rectangle instead of a diamond. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete it and redo it. If you caught that one, you was a real one, okay?
One step ahead of
So basically every time the user tries to log in, we want to make sure that the variable attempt is adding 1 to itself. So instead of actually writing attempt equals attempt plus 1 and programming, and specifically since we're starting in Java, we can write attempt plus equals 1, and it means the exact same thing. So every time the program reaches this part of the program, or in this case, every time we reach this part of the flowchart, we know we're adding an additional digit to the attempt. We know that we're adding 1 more to the attempt, and we're going to do that until it gets to 5. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and actually move that register point up to attempt is equal to 0, because it just makes more sense that way. Once you register and once you start to freshly log in, your attempt is going to be equal to 0.
I'm only
So now going through the program, we're going to start. The welcome screen is displayed. So is the user registered? If not, we're going to just register the user, and our attempt for logins are going to start off at 0. But if the user is registered, we're just going to start at 0, and we're going to ask, is the attempt greater or less than 5? Of course, it is not greater than 5, so we're just going to continue on to logging in. So after trying to attempt to log in, we're going to add 1 to the attempt, and then if the login is valid, we'll just go ahead and stop. But in this case, we're just going to fill up the invalid attempts to see what happens. So now we have 1 is greater than 5, no, so we'll log in, add an additional attempt. So now we have 2. Was the login valid? Nope, so we're going to go ahead and bring it back up. So is 2 greater than 5? No, it's not. So we're going to continue to log in, add an additional attempt. Now we're at 3 attempts and the login was not valid. So we'll bring it back up. 3 is not greater than 5. So then we're going to go ahead and log in. Try to attempt again. Nope. Come back. 4 is not greater than 5. Log in. Add an additional attempt. Now we're at 5. 5 is not greater than 5. It is equal to 5. So in that case, this is our final attempt, but still we can continue to log in. Is it valid? No, we're going to say no. And we're going to go back up to the top. So in this case, now we're at 6 attempts. We've added to 5, now there's 6. So we can say that 6 is greater than 5, and we're going to go ahead and stop the program. Now there are plenty of things we could have added to this diagram, mainly pertaining to input and output. We could have shown like the amount of attempts. We could have shown where the user was inputting their input. But like I said, this was a very surface level flowchart just so you can understand the basics. So I'm actually going to end it right here. I hope you were able to keep up. If not, you can try going back and watch it again, pause it, whatever, but we're going to stop it right here. So that will conclude this episode of Before the Code. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you learned something today about flowcharts. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And follow us on Instagram at CodeInPink. That's CodeNPink. If you want to follow me personally, you can do that too at NIYALATORR. So yeah, once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to come back next Wednesday for another tutorial, because on Wednesdays, we code pink.
all I have to take. That was to be the same old fool for you I used to be. I'm only